The Honorable Allan Ritter. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you.
And I thank you very much for coming. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for being here.
Good morning. Pleasure to be here.
Big crowd because people care about this issue. So let's get right to it.
Slow day in Austin.
I guess it is. Can you quantify the magnitude of the problem? This has been a problem that for most people has been largely asserted rather than proven. Most of the people in this room turn their tap on, water comes out. They turn on their sprinklers on the days they're supposed to and not, and the water comes out. So for a lot of people in here, the problem is more a problem that they don't experience themselves, but they hear a lot about. You know more about this than we do. Can you quantify the magnitude of it, please?
It's just our future. I don't know how else to put it, but take a little time, read a little history about Texas, the drought record in the 50s. Just jump forward to 2011, and really that puts it in perspective, where you have areas where I live in southeast Texas that, you know, our normal rainfall is about 60 inches. In 2011, it was about 24 inches. The effect it had on our basin, the fact that we look up in August of 2011, we have an 11-month supply of water for our area, and we supply 10% of the fuel for the United States of America. It's real. And what I've seen since really 2010, since about October 2010, the attitude changing all across Texas, where people are understanding how important this issue of water is, and they're understanding how important the development of water for our future is. And it starts right there in our own backyard.
And it affects every area of life in Texas, and it really isn't something that we have complete control over. Obviously, conservation is something that we can practice, and we'll talk about some of the measures that we can have our hands on to help solve. But the reality is, if it doesn't rain, it doesn't rain.
You're right.
Yeah.
The good Lord giveth, and sometimes He taketh away.
And the population growth of the state is no doubt exacerbating this problem as it exacerbates.
Well, that's correct. That's correct. The water plan, which I think is a really good plan. And I take my hat off to Buster and Ron Lewis and Bullock and everybody that worked on that for so long, because it is really a good plan, a perpetual plan that from the bottom up that really gives us the ability to address the issue, but also unite this state for all of us together, because those of us in East Texas, sometimes we think a little bit different, and we should from folks in West Texas. Our needs, our requirements are quite different. But this plan, to me, is the nexus for us uniting these, all the regions and such together to get this problem solved. Because it's going to take all of us together, working together to get this problem solved.
And just so we're clear on this, the cost of not doing something is significantly greater. The numbers I've seen, if we don't
quadruple
come up with an adequate plan that will be 8.3 million acre feet short in 2060, and that we're looking at a cost to the state, to businesses and to workers of $116 billion.
That's correct.
In the case of inaction. So basically, if we have a $53 billion state water plan, the cost of doing nothing is more than double the cost of doing something.
That's correct.
Right.
That's correct. Also, you have a line somewhere where you cap your economy. It's over. If you don't have the water resource to provide for society, for your economic engine, that's your cap.
Yeah.
And Texas then would have to do a complete 180 in our management strategy of growth. We would have limited to no growth. It would be a totally different concept and practice than what we're doing today.
Okay, so let's accept the fact that doing nothing is not an option. Let's talk about what you're attempting to do. There's a $53 billion completely unfunded plan on the table. You say you like it. We'll get into the specifics of the plan and whether it's as good as all that in a second. But you've proposed essentially a revolving loan fund of $2 billion that would be withdrawn from the rainy day fund. Ironic that we'd be solving a problem of not enough rain with the rainy day fund. But you're talking about withdrawing $2 billion from the rainy day fund to jumpstart this plan as a sort of a revolving loan fund, as I said. Would you talk about what you mean specifically by that and how that would be beneficial to us?
Well, in our due diligence over the last 3 or 4 years, trying to solve the puzzle how we move forward, it's real simple. We're talking about infrastructure. Infrastructure requires money to pay for it? And do we look at it that we're going to fund it, appropriate it every biennium, and to what degree?
It is a 50-year plan, so we don't have to pay for it all right now.
That's right. It's a 50-year plan subject to change.
Right.
And in several of the meetings with the Water Development Board and other entities, I can't even remember who was in the office, but it's quite a few of us, and we were talking about the Clean Water Fund and how successful it'd been. And it's a bank. It's an infrastructure bank, and it works. It's worked well. We also have, the state of Texas has another one dealing with transportation. I think it's 25 years old. That has worked well. So we started taking that concept and moving it forward. And actually, you saw where we, last year, filed the bill, passed the bill out of the committee with our first attempt at it. And what we did then, because we were having the difficulty of finding money hanging on the tree leaves in Texas, let me tell you, it's very difficult. Yeah. And our approach was to see if we couldn't take some money out of the System Benefit Fund. Anyway, the committee did pass it. We couldn't get it to the floor and get a vote on it, but I think it was a great first move. And what it did gave us during the interim, where we really could do more work on the details of the plan, the difference between WIF funding, WIF contract, WIF deferred, state participation, the deferred in state participation, and how long these deferrals need to be. Now remember, this plan didn't come from the Pink Building, it didn't come from the Water Development Board, it came from 16 different regional groups that are my neighbors, my friends in my area, and yours and yours. They are telling us what they need. They are the ones that are telling us the kind of participation they want us to do. It's not me. It's not Governor Perry. It's not the Lieutenant Governor or Senator Frazier. It is we the people. So everything that we are doing looking forward has to be based on that plan.
And they're telling you that a $2 billion, I mean, you obviously arrived at that number
they're telling
strategically.
Yes, they're telling us they need these kind of projects that are their performance, or it's going to cost $53 billion to do it. They're telling us that they need this kind of help in certain funding mechanisms, whether it's deferred 5 years, maybe even out more, or just a construction with a subsidy up front of 1% buy down to help get it going. And one of the many goals that we've had in our committee, number one, is how do we keep the state of Texas competitive in our natural resource of water? Number one goal. If you can't keep the state competitive, you got a problem. And you can see what other states are doing. They're doing the same thing we are, getting prepared for the next 50 years, because they know infrastructure like water, electricity, in order for them to have an economic engine, they're going to be able to have to compete with us. But anyway, we've taken all this into consideration, and we just extrapolated that, okay, if you got $1 billion, we extrapolated over the lifetime of the plan, the type of funding mechanisms. Right. If you took seed capital of $1 billion, of course we started out with $500 million, $1.5 billion, all the way up. Where would it take us in that timeline path of 50 years? It's a 50-year plan. And just what we had kind of thought, the number is $2 billion, doing an infrastructure bank revolving.
So Governor Dewhurst has put $1 billion on the table, potentially on the Senate side. Representative Larson from San Antonio, who knows quite a bit about the water issue, is also talking about $1 billion. But you're convinced that it's $2 billion, not $1 billion.
Billion doesn't do it.
$2 billion is what we need.
On a one-time seed capital.
Have you tried to persuade Governor Dewhurst to revise his plan and meet you at $2 billion?
Well, yes.
How's that working out for you so far?
Actually, pretty good.
You think he'll come back around to $2 billion?
Oh, I'm not going to speak for the governor. Senator Frazier, my good friend who I love working with, and Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst, we have been working with them a lot.
Yeah.
And we're all exchanging ideas. Because let me tell you, just because we've laid this out, that doesn't, I wish there were 150 bills filed in the House. That would be the greatest thing on earth for me. Turn over every rock, look at every idea, every avenue.
Well, there are challenges.
I'm convinced, and I think most people that have looked at the runs and such are convinced if you do a one-time seed capital injection, $2 billion is the number. Now, you don't have to do that. But two things happen if you don't do that. Either you have got to have a supplemental revenue source in order to do it, or you got to be prepared to let that timeline, your critical path timeline, go from 50 years out to 100. And it jumps out real quick.
Well, I want to talk about the other revenue stuff in a second, but let me stick with the rainy day fund. You know it's a huge challenge procedurally to get money out of the rainy day fund, and temperamentally, the legislature last time didn't seem particularly eager to do much with the rainy day fund. I'm not certain that the composition of this legislature is any more temperamentally disposed to just spend a whole bunch of money, rosy revenue estimates and surpluses notwithstanding. What makes you think you've got the votes to get the money out of the rainy day fund, especially, if I may say, looking directly at Senator Campbell, on the Senate side, given the fact that the Senate has gotten a whole lot more fiscally conservative with the change out of those 5 members than it was last session?
Well, Evan, I don't believe I ever told you I had the votes.
You're just putting oh really? So we can all just go home? We all get our mornings back then? This all for naught? Are you concerned you don't have the votes?
It's not for naught. Our job is to come up with ideas. And if you look, what we've done, we've laid out from the ultimate goal of a one-time seed capital of $2 billion to, okay, do you go down, or do you go 1.5? How much supplement do you need to $1 billion to $500 million? And then do we come in and do tap fee, whatever other kind of revenue basis. So we've got it very broad of which way the legislature wants to go. Our job was to find the avenues. Our job and all of y'all's job is to help educate everybody as to what the options are, what the issues are, so the legislature on both houses can make their decision.
So you're going into this without a clear sense yet of whether the votes are there, counting heads and all that. You're not sure whether you've got the votes.
I can tell you this, I've had more calls from members of the Senate, more calls and activity from members of the House, from very conservative people.
Both sides
that are saying this is the way to do it.
Right.
Now, this is a legislature. I'm a realist, you know.
Yeah.
We'll get there.
Well, generally speaking, the temperament for spending on anything the last couple of sessions hasn't been enormous. And as you yourself told the New York Times within the last week or so, in some respects, this is a binary choice. Even if it's a better budget than the last time, there's a finite amount of dollars. And you know, the see the 300 people who were in this room last week advocating for public ed funding to be restored to some degree. It may not be literally an either or, but those things and other big ticket items are all going to be in competition for a finite number of dollars.
That's correct, and that's why we get paid the big dollars to make those.
Are you prepared to make the case that water is a priority greater this time than public ed?
Yes, as far as a one-time seed capital injection, yes, sir.
So you'd rather see that, if you knew that you could get $2 billion out of the rainy day fund, you'd rather see that $2 billion go to seed the water plan than to restore some of the public ed cuts?
You can't restore and continue doing public ed with a one-time seed capital injection. Yeah. Water is the only one you can. Can't do it with transportation, you can't do it with public ed, you can't do it with higher ed.
Right.
Water is the only one, and that's because we have the water plan that is a timeline plan. That's the main reason why I strongly support this, because we can take $2 billion in a one-time seed capital injection with this revolving infrastructure bank program, and we can lay this issue on the table. Now, let me remind everyone, this is based on the state water plan that is printed today. I can't tell you for sure what the future looks like. I can't tell you what rates are going to do.
Could be more expensive, could be less.
Well, the plan could change.
Right.
I can't tell you what innovations are going to be. Are we now going to be seeing new technology, better innovations where desal becomes more of a entity in the plan? Are the plan funding mechanisms going to change where we now have 87% our water infrastructure and 11% of state participation. Will that change? That changes the modeling, and the entity that Water Development Board that has oversight of this plan has got to have the flexibility to be able to move as the people that need the programs where they work. To give everybody the chance and the fair and balanced program. But it's clear. The only thing that you can spend, in my mind, and no one has been able to prove me wrong yet, that you can put $2 billion in and lay on the table is water.
If you assume that 53 billion is roughly the number of the total nut for this thing, and so you take $2 billion off the table through this one-time deal, you still have to get $51 billion in the next number of years, not out of one-time funds.
The state doesn't. That's the
no,
53.
Combination of sources, I understand.
Correct.
That, right. So where's that money going to come from?
That's going to be coming from bonding or public-private partnerships or such. On the case of the state participation, it will be coming from bonding.
Okay. You mentioned a tap fee earlier. You've attempted this before, and I know you have thoughts about a tap fee that would essentially ask users to pay a little bit, individuals to pay a little bit, companies to pay a little bit more, industry to pay a little bit more, and after a period of time you get to, I think I've heard you say something like half of the total cost of the plan. Is that right? You get to about $26 billion after a period of time on the tap fee?
You get through the plan.
You can actually get to the. Talk about how you do it. Yeah.
That depends on the seed capital and then the revenue supporting it.
Talk about what the tap fee would be if you were going to. And are you planning on bringing it up again this session? It's okay. We won't tell anybody. Just tell us.
Right now, it's still a tap fee still on the table.
Yeah.
And the tap fee's on the table because when you look at you and I as residents paying, I think it was about $3.50 a year. That was about at least a burden as we could find on residential entities, and be able to have oversight, be able to have a program that it flowed and it worked. Industry, I think industry was $100 something a year for a tap fee. And while none of us wanted to pay it, they could live with it. Commercial, like my retail yards, I think we had it at 50 or 60 bucks, something like that. Again, we went back to the priority that how do we do it where it's as least burden on we the people, we the ratepayers, the taxpayers. How do you spread that burden across as many entities as possible, where you don't specifically pick out an industry or a geographic area and punish them. We really believe that you got to keep the state competitive, and you need to be as fair and
balanced. What's the objection
to
the tap fee? That it's effectively, you don't call it a tax, but essentially people are paying more, and therefore it's like a tax.
It's a fee.
Yeah.
Can
you play that can you sell that semantic game to the legislature? Well, we're all duty bound, we've locked down ourselves, we're opposing taxes, but we're going to somehow make ourselves comfortable with this other thing that's not a tax, even though everyone's going to pay more.
I think that goes back to the individual members, the decisions that they have to make. I think that things are different now than they were in 2011, just like they're considerably different now than they were in 2003. This issue, you have people that are very concerned, they're talking about it. We have, our speaker has come out very, very strong, has stood up, and it kind of reminds me of Sam Houston. Here's a guy with vision saying, we have to do this.
Right, but he's spoken out. The speaker has spoken out, Chairman. The speaker has spoken out in favor of a solution to the water problem. I'm not aware of the speaker speaking out in favor of a tap fee.
No, I didn't say that.
Right.
The importance of us solving this problem.
In some way.
That's right.
Right.
And we'll go through the process, and we'll give the members the opportunity to have a vote.
You think the tap fee would violate the governor's budget compact, and do you care?
No, I don't care. Okay. I don't know how else to tell you.
All right. Well, you just did tell me, actually.
I never did sign the budget compact, so.
All right.
I don't believe that that's my job.
All right. What about a straightaway
So I
tax?
just made him mad.
You probably did, and not just him, but that's okay.
That's not the first time.
No. What about a tax straight away? If you're going to do a fee, why not walk the additional few paces and do a tax on bottled water or some other kind of a...
Bottled water won't get you there. It's not enough money.
The problem with that is not so much
Yeah.
an opposition to taxes in the main, it's just that the math doesn't work.
Well, Evan, you're always going to have the opposition to taxes in the Texas legislature. I don't care what it is. You're
Right.
going to have that opposition.
What about in the Ritter household? Would you be personally for that? Forget about the math.
If that solved the problem,
Yeah.
and specifically where I could go home and I could look at my constituents and say, here's what we did. We increased sales tax on bottled water. Here's what you're going to get out of it. Yeah, I don't have a problem with, because my constituents will understand the value of that tax increase or such, what they're getting. To me, that's very easy to go home and explain, and clearly my constituents will understand that the reason why, and here's
Yeah.
the value. Whether it's a fee or a tax or whatever, there has to be a value, in my opinion. Why are we doing it? You know, in this case with water, it's very easy to explain, even in my area. We've got to have, I think it's 180,000 acre feet of water in the next 30, 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it isn't free. It's going to cost money. And, you know, we're going to have to stand up and do it, or we're going to have to totally
Right.
change our management plan.
Let me get to that question of how you persuade the public. We've talked a lot about internal politics. Can you get the votes for the rainy day fund? Is the temperament of the legislature going to be open to the idea of a fee or a tax? But let's talk about the external politics. I think of this as a not in my front yard problem. Ross Ramsey, my colleague, describes it as the Battle of St. Augustine. The reality is that, and I think his is better than mine, the reality is that however you slice this, the public has to be persuaded that there's a problem. And again, if you live in Groesbeck, you might turn on the tap and nothing comes out, and the problem is very real for you. But if you live in even some of the big cities that have been in peril over the years, they're still turning on the tap, water's coming out. So how do you get people to get around to the idea that the problem is of a significant enough magnitude that they should do this? And even when you convince them of that, you tell them, okay, the problem's this big, but there are water restrictions. Well, they bristle. Or you tell them that they can't have the green lawns they want, and they bristle. So how do you persuade people that it is in their interest to act in everybody else's interest? I do think this is a challenge.
And maybe some of the horror stories about running out, once people really live through that and hear about it and such. But one of the most important things that we're going to have to do is as us individually, as us citizens of Texas, but we're going to have local leadership step up. A lot of the problem that we have in Texas is local leadership doesn't step up and make these hard decisions when they need to. The state of Texas doesn't go in there and tell you, you're going to go build this, you're going to go do this infrastructure. That's the local entities. And personally, I've seen a lot of the problems that have risen is because leadership in the local level and the local entities just don't want to do it. Now, the other side of that is, does the Groesbeck or whoever or Jefferson County have the right not to do it? Well, yeah, they do. We can't make them do it.
They also may not, Chairman, they also may not have the resources.
No, now, if they don't have the resources and the ability, that's what's important to us. How do we help them get over that hump?
Right.
And as you will find, you know, the Houstons, the Dallases, San Antonios, they have the ability to do planning as good as anybody. When you get to the Groesbecks, they don't.
Yeah.
You know, how do we help them get through that hump? And that's what I think what Buster and everybody did with the state water plan gives us a big step in doing that. But still, they got to make those decisions to do it. We don't need to be doing that at the Pink Dome. They need to be doing that locally. And, you know, it's hard to imagine, but they do have the right to say, well, we don't want to do anymore.
And then,
we don't want any more growth.
And then they own the consequences of inaction.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right. And you're seeing that in some places in Texas.
On the local level, one of the things we hear about, Andy Sansom down at Texas State at the Meadow Center is a big, talks about this quite a bit, is that one of the problems offline from not enough rain is that we have such bad infrastructure in a lot of the communities, leaky pipes and leaky storage facilities, that not only do we not have enough water now, but we're losing too much of the water we do have because we haven't invested adequately in a lot of this very outmoded infrastructure. Now, that's something that can occur at the local level, but it's not cheap.
No,
and
it's
often
not.
it's a binary choice for those local communities in the same way that is a choice at the state level. You can have this but not that.
That's right, and that's going to, they're going to have to address it. Remember, this is infrastructure. This is infrastructure that has a lifetime, 50 years, 100 years, whatever it is.
Yep.
In my area, city of Port Arthur has pretty good loss factor. They're now in programs to redo it, but that's going to be all across state, and that's going to be never ending because this infrastructure has a lifetime. Reservoirs have a lifetime.
Could you see a scenario, Chairman, where, and I realize these are not perfect analogies, but just as Mayor Castro in San Antonio was able to put his personal capital, political capital behind a modest sales tax increase to fund pre-K, or just as Senator Watson here worked very hard to pass an initiative on the ballot to fund a medical school and a teaching hospital, could you see local communities taking the local control option and saying, if the state is not adequately able to provide the resources to get this going, we need to take control of our situations locally and do some kind of a modest tax increase that the community buys into to fund some of these infrastructure redos or some of these projects locally that the state won't pay for?
I think you're going to see us be talking about that this session.
You do?
Yeah, and I'd rather give the privilege to the members of the committee and the members of the House and Senate debating that than right now as chairman come out and tell you what I think. I think there's good and bad.
I think you just did tell us. I mean, it sounds like you're not entirely opposed. It sounds like you're not entirely opposed to the idea of some kind of local control.
Now, Evan, you know me. When I'm open-minded, but when I'm opposed, you're going to know.
I'm going to know it. Well, let me end before we go to the audience, Chairman, on something you mentioned earlier, and I appreciated you keeping your mind open to this. And that is the theory among some in the water community that we talk about we need $53 billion to fund a water plan, only it's the wrong plan. The idea is that this is a plan, if I'm characterizing this in a correct way, very basic characterization, it's a plan that assumes we can engineer our way out of the problem. That we're going to get a bunch of land, we're going to build a bunch of reservoirs, we're going to acquire a bunch of right-of-way, which these days, especially ask the Transamerica people, is no small matter. You get opposition on eminent domain from people all over the place. But you're going to acquire a bunch of right-of-way, and you're going to build pipes to take the water from the place it is to the place it needs to be, when some people say that's actually so 20th century as a solution. And that technology, you mentioned desal plants, and other forms of technology actually have the potential to transform what the plan ought to be. Might be cheaper, might be faster, might be easier. So you showed some openness to considering that maybe this plan that we're talking about needs to be relooked at. Is that right?
This plan's going to be relooked at every 5 years.
Yeah.
It's a perpetual plan.
So we shouldn't assume that any money we put in today, we're just locking ourselves into this kind of a plan right now.
That's correct in a way, other than we have to base it on what the plan says.
Yeah.
Now, do I believe that everything in the state water plan that's between now and the year 2040 will be the same? No.
Yeah.
And I hope there is change. I hope there is new technology and new innovation that'll make us change. I personally think that we have to do a better job in conservation.
Yeah.
While this is, I know y'all are going to laugh at me when I say, look, this plan is really immature. While Buster and them did it in 1999, 15 years ago in the water world, that isn't too long. And this plan is going to be maturing a lot once we do get a funding mechanism set. And my belief is that you're going to start seeing when a good funding source is set and you start seeing projects and such done, and really people are going to really start feeling good, okay, we have a workable plan from development through funding to help us go. Then I think you're going to start seeing public-private participation projects where I'm just going to pick a city. The city of Austin will do a deal with a investment group or construction group or whoever in a legitimate partnership. I think you're going to see the regions even unite better and be making more of an emphasis on how reuse, desal works, which is conservation,
Yep.
and how we can do better at conservation. Can we all follow the mode of what San Antonio's doing? Things like that. But just like, you know, I don't even remember what year we did the legislation for low-flow toilets and stuff, which it takes years.
Yep.
It takes years, but that's a big deal. We're going
Right.
to save a lot of water.
Takes time to change
Yeah.
behavior. So some of the innovations may come in some of these things that we haven't yet seen.
Yeah, and we got to, you know, we got to keep going, not do anything stupid, not do anything that's going to reverse the path that we're going and move us backwards. You know, our society, we have to be prepared for the future, 2060. We know what it's going to take. It's going to take us developing close to 9 million acre feet. And folks, that's a lot of Toledo Bends.
Yep.
That's a lot of water. We have the plan to do it, and but it's an ongoing, living, breathing thing. And with all of us, the more people involved, thinking out of the box, really understanding that conservation is going to be something that is going to be more and more important, that we are going to have to bring into our daily lives. We're going to have to do it. It's going to happen.
All right.
I might be dead before it happens.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you for sharing your thoughts on this issue. We appreciate it. Good to see you here. Chairman Ritter, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.